Plus, so I spoke to you, Brighton People's Theatre. That's exciting. Who else is joining us? Please do pop your name and where you're from in the chat box, which on my screen is over there, but I've got no idea whether I'm pointing the right way or not. Is it that way? Or is it not? I'll just point that way. Emily from Kennedy Station in, Kennedy Street, sorry, in Southwick. Anybody else hasn't said hello, please do. I think we're expecting about 50 people, so I will keep waiting to see who else is joining. Hello, Gemma. Oh, about to be made redundant from Alzheimer's. So that obviously is very sad, but an exciting opportunity going freelance. Lots of people talking about going freelance at the moment. Do join the Institute of Fundraising Consultants group. There's lots of interesting stuff going on there, Gemma. Hello, Louise Collins, Sussex Wildlife Trust. Anybody else joining, please do pop your, waiting to see who else is joining. So pop your name and where you're from in the chat box, please. So we know who you are and where you come from. We're expecting most people to be based either in Brighton Hove or in Merton, but some people come from slightly other places. So what do we reckon? How strict are we going to be about a 2 o'clock start? Should we give people a couple more minutes just in case they're struggling with their Zoom or coordinating small people?
Yeah, let's give it a couple more minutes. Yeah. I think.
Got a wonderful mix of organisations popping up there. Alison from Voices in Exile, Veronica, Putney Arts Theatre. Hello, Stephen from the Sussex Community Foundation. Who have I missed? Oh, another one from Whoops Daisy. Hello, Caroline, and Liana from, oh, I can't quite read, London Symphony Orchestra. For some reason it cut off half of your organisation name. Anybody else joining us? I can see a few more people popping in. Please do pop over in the chat box where you're from and who you are, so we can say hello and we can know who's here. Obviously you don't have to. Vicky has now made this live streaming on Facebook, so people won't be able to see the attendees, but obviously they can see what you can see on the screen here. So we're going to give people a couple more minutes. Those coming in, say hello. So see Chris from Morrison Design. Oh, it's going too quickly up now. Abigail Little Green Pig. Jenna from Charity Haylage Foundation. Hello. Tabitha from Yvonne Arnold. Oh, hello, Tabitha. You're right. Keep saying hello in the chat box, letting us know where you're from. It's also really useful to us to see a mix of who's coming in and what organisations they're from. Vicky from Plus Accounting, Donna, Banyan Tree Theatre Group, hello. We've got a mix of people coming in from Brighton and Hove and Merton. Sorry to those who've been here a while and sound like I'm just repeating myself, but obviously for new people coming in, they haven't heard me say this 4 times already. Please do pop your name and where you're from in the chat box, and we'll get started in another minute. Interesting to see quite a mix of different sectors. You know, this session is targeted at creative industries, but I can see organisations from a range of different sectors, different charities, some using arts and creativity in their work, others maybe not so much, some artists, some people working for organisations, some freelancers, so we've got a real mix. So we will try and keep that in mind whilst we're doing the Q&A, but we, you know, the presentations that the speakers are doing should be relevant to everybody. So Vicky, shall we crack on?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. It's the first time I've ever done this live, although we tested it earlier, so let's see if it's still working. Okay, press a few buttons, here we go. So, oh, that's not the first slide, there we go. First hiccup. So welcome everybody. My name is Lucy Stone. I run a consultancy called Stone Unturned Fundraising, and I'll be chairing the session today. You know, as we know, the creative industries are facing a number of extraordinary challenges right now. And today we'll be hearing from a range of different fundraising experts on different range of income streams. So today I'm wearing my Always Possible associate hat. At Always Possible, we help leaders work out what is next. Always Possible supports society's transformation through research, events, and radical collaboration. And they help build businesses through mentoring, planning support, and guidance around inclusive growth and decision making. This session is a webinar from a series of events that's coming up to help fast track recovery in the creative industries and third sectors. So today is actually a collaboration between Brighton Hove Arts and Creative Industries Commission and Merton Cultural Advisory Group. It's actually funded by Brighton Hove City Council and London Borough of Merton. So a bit of housekeeping, not your normal fire escapes and comfort breaks. So you take your comfort breaks whenever you want, you're at home. So please add any Q&As, questions that you have to the Q&A box. Do remember that the Q&As will be visible on the live stream. The chat box, I believe, is not. If you want to tweet, please do. If you tag @alwayspossible, hashtag creative recovery, hashtag post-traumatic growth. Somebody's keeping an eye on that and they can reply, share the conversation, and anything that's then happening online can feed in over here. If you want to learn something else in more detail from what we've covered today, or something else altogether, you can send Vicky a personal message in the chat function as the host, and she'll be able to note that down and look at the future planning around whatever it is you want to learn. All of the presentations that we have are going to be sent out afterwards, so please do not worry about, you know, getting down everything that's on the screen. And as I've said about 20 times already, please say hello, let us know who you are and what you do in the chat box. So just another note on the follow-up, we have links here for how you become involved in the conversation and continue to get support and guidance in Brighton and Hove. And also, if you're in the London Borough of Merton, there is a Slack channel, but you just need to pop an email over to Always Possible just to be added to that Slack channel. So we have 4 absolutely fantastic speakers coming out. We've got an amazing range of experience, background, loads of knowledge, so please do pick people's brains. We're covering a range of different fundraising today. Each of them is going to talk for 10 minutes. Then we're going to do a bit of a Q&A and debate. And I'm going to exit that. Sharing that, and then I believe Vicky's going to pop a poll up while I just introduce Joanna. Vicky, are you able to do the poll?
Yeah, it's on its way.
There you go. So based on your current situation, how ready do you feel to fundraise during the pandemic? I can't vote apparently, so there you go. So I'm going to hand it over to Jo shortly. Jo is a creative arts and events specialist. She's also a consultant and lecturer. She works in a number of industries, but mainly in the arts and cultural sector. Today, she's going to be covering reframing your work and fundraising. So when you're thinking about what you need to fundraise for, you need to be really clear about your plan. Jo's going to encourage us to think about innovating our work as well as reframing where we are and start creating our new normal. Thank you, Jo. So I will...
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I'll just get my screen shared and then I'll put my presentation up. So I'll be back shortly. Hold on. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Lucy, would you just confirm for me?
Yes.
Yep, great, thank you. Ooh. Okay, well, I was going to start with a bit about me, but Lucy gave me such a good introduction there that I don't need to. So much of my work has been in arts development and fundraising for third sector organisations and projects. So I've got a lot of experience developing creative strategies and programmes with charitable aims and outcomes, most of which require funding from grants and trusts in order to support project costs. So today I wanted to talk about reframing our creative work in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and within that, building a case for fundraising. I'm going to use the festival that I work for, Southwest Fest, as a case study and talk about how we've approached this ourselves and what we've learned in the process. So a bit of background about Southwest Fest. We're a cultural community festival, take place in South Westminster, We're a charity that was set up in 2008, but actually the festival was first produced in 2004. The aims of the festival are to produce opportunities that encourage community cohesion, to support neighbourhood renewal by tackling social exclusion and promoting local services, and generating partnerships and collaborations between local people, community groups, and organisations. We achieve this by working in collaboration with local partners, artists and practitioners to plan events, workshops and activities which take place each year and change each year and engage and inspire the residents to come out and take part. Each of our programmes take place over 3 weeks in July. We usually have between 60 and 80 events, workshops and activities. That includes both a curated programme that we commission and an open access programme that our partners register their own events in. It also includes our outdoor festival day, which is kind of the main feature piece of the festival, in a park in Pimlico in South Westminster, which sees a footfall of around 7,000 local people, usually in attendance. All the events we produce in-house are made for free. So to do this, we have to fundraise to support the costs of the festival, as we don't make a ticket income. Our fundraising includes funding from grants, income from sponsorships, crowdfunding, and a small income from stalls and advertising opportunities. We also work closely with Westminster Council, but we're not funded directly by them. So, as you can imagine, with the onset of coronavirus this year, in February and March, we had to make some very difficult decisions about what we do as a charity and how we move forward with the festival as an event, and the decision as to and when to cancel this year's festival. We also faced a lot of financial issues because we had deposits already paid out and insurance policies that didn't cover coronavirus in terms of cancellations. We had to cancel a lot of our freelance staff contracts, and we had to work out what to do with our specific project funding, which was already ring-fenced for creative projects this year. So through March and April, we've been mainly researching, getting advice, and I would say firefighting our current situation. So after having to make a hard decision to cancel the festival in July, and once we were done with the worst of the firefighting, our next question has been, what now? What are our options? As a charity whose main focus is in organising a large annual event, by cancelling our event, our festival, we had very little left on our plate for the rest of the year. We also had no incoming funding because a lot of our funding connects to the projects we're running. So we met with our trustees and our core volunteers and started looking at our options. We all strongly felt that we didn't want to just do nothing. It wouldn't be following our charitable aims to just stop serving our community. We also know from feedback of our partners and our audiences that the festival is looked forward to each year, and that for the organisations we work with, the festival offers a key opportunity for collaboration and wider engagement and outreach into the community, and that our communities are better supported because of what they've learned about the services that are involved in the festival and the access to the opportunities the festival offers. We also looked at various options regarding delaying to a later date, producing a small event in the winter, but with no guarantees on how the pandemic would affect public gatherings. We really felt like planning any kind of return to a physical event was very risky for us. So we started to talk about options for online delivery of events, but we were also aware of the fact that many of our partners, organisations and services, have also started to deliver online. So we're aware of the potential that we might end up replicating services already on offer. We also wanted to know about demographics of residents who are taking up these online services. As part of our work, we try and reach more isolated members of the community and want to make sure our events are inclusive and accessible. So by going online, we wondered who might not be able to access us. So we decided to speak to our partners and also do research and review other information being provided by our local council and other key services to try and get a better understanding of the current gaps in service and the current needs of our local residents. It was key to us that although we might look at reframing our work and delivering something new, that our main charitable aims and outcomes are still met and our community was still supported. We also had to consider what resources we had in diverting our work from a physical event production and think about the limitations of our time and capacity in working with a reduced workforce, including key volunteers who are unable to be involved due to wider pandemic-related issues. Further to that, we're also aware that we didn't want that anything we chose to do now would be new and different from our usual work. We have 15 years experience producing our physical festival and proof of positive outcomes that come with that. However, by directing ourselves in a new and different delivery, we're heading into unknown territory. And it's important that we acknowledge and recognise that this new work would be testing, piloting and developing for the charity. Finally, there is also a recognition that we wanted to use this time of change as an opportunity to evolve and innovate and look at the ways that we work and what we do and how we do it. So, two key points of feedback which came from our partners was that there was actually a diverse range of community accessing online content, including some of the more isolated members of our communities. However, our partners did feed back that although the activities were going online, they still felt that further promotion and engagement with the wider community and residents in the area was needed. So from this feedback and wider research we conducted and the discussions of our trustees and volunteers, this is kind of how we've been looking at reframing our work for 2020. So starting simple, we decided that straight off, the easiest thing we could do straight away was to dedicate more time to using our social media platforms for signposting to other services, highlighting and promoting important work locally. We would then work within our capacity to deliver a new service. So we've developed a fundraising bid to support a smaller and more affordable week-long digital festival, which offers some of the same aims and outcomes as our physical festival, but is delivered online, going for quality over quantity of content. In this, we were looking to commission and curate special online workshops, events and activities which will act as a hook to draw people's interest to the festival programme, to promote an open access programme of partner events and activities which will still work to highlight and promote services and opportunities that are available in the area, and also to collaborate with partners to create crossover projects, widen engagement, as well as finding further support in-kind and match funding for the project. Finally, we also want to look at how we can redirect our resources and make the most of the time created through not having to work on large-scale physical productions of events. So instead, we've decided to use the freed up time this year that we have to work on an impact research project to help us quantify the longer-term legacy and impact the festival's made in the past, and also to help us to continue future programmes which reflect on these new interests and new needs that our community has. In this, we will hopefully want to put ourselves in a stronger position for future fundraising and getting buy-in from sponsors and other corporate partners. So, a summary of what we've learned on the process of doing this. So, from the research and measured work we've done, we've built our case for fundraising and applied to a local grant-giving organisation specifically for funding towards this digital festival programme, of which our bid was thankfully successful. We at the same time approached one of our partners for match funding through collaboration on some of the digital festival events, as well as committing some of our own reserves to supporting the project to enable the festival to move forward in a new form of delivery, so we were able to continue to work to support our local community and organisations, providing opportunities to residents in Westminster in 2020. We've also put bids in to support our research project, but we're still waiting the outcome of those bids, in which we'll be using the digital festival as part of our research and data collection. So in summary, thinking about how we reframe what we do, see reframing as a positive opportunity. Research the current needs and gaps in delivery, although I am aware that those needs and gaps are constantly changing at the moment, but be up to date as you can. Don't be scared to innovate, explore or discover. We've never done an online event before at South West Fest. I'm very ashamed to say. We've always stuck with physical delivery of events. So now we are having to look at what we do and how we do it. We are innovating our practices and processes whilst doing this project. Test and pilot the work. If you haven't done something before, it's okay to start small and simple in order to build big. And it's also okay to be honest about that. Find partners and collaborate. We are always stronger together. I mean, that was our motto before, but it's 100% our motto now in the current pandemic. And use what you've learned along the way to build a stronger case for funding. So it's about taking those measured steps and doing your research in order to help you build and plan a stronger case for funding. So finally, my 3 points to take away were to start simple, and it's okay to start simple. Don't be scared to innovate and test, and to be honest about the fact that you might not have done something before and you're having to try it out because we're facing new challenges. And then look at how you can reframe and start creating the new normal. Thank you. I will now try and stop sharing my screen. There we go. Oh, lovely. I'm all done. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to put my video back on. That's what I forgot. Great.
Thank you so much, Jo. That was really fantastic.
Good.
Just to remind everybody that if you've got any questions specifically about what Jo said, or just general questions you want to ask, you can pop in the Q&A box. There was just a question about the presentations. I think as some of your fantastic slides were going through, people were like, oh, how can I capture this?
Oh, yeah.
It will be sent out afterwards, so don't worry about that. So next up is Martha. Martha is a fundraising consultant specialising in corporate partnerships, as well as being an organiser of hashtag Charity So White. I'm going to say it again because I mumbled that. Hashtag Charity So White. Everybody needs to check that out after this session. Martha has previously worked at Refuge, West London Mission, Ronald McDonald House Charities, as well as in other various kind of face-to-face roles. Today she's talking about corporate fundraising. I think we wanted to cover this because people assume that there is no corporate fundraising going on right now, but Martha's really going to challenge that assumption and kind of give you some ways to think about it moving forward. So I'm going to mute and hand you over to Martha.
Thanks, Lucy. So I'm really sorry, there's some building work going on outside my house and I thought it was over, so I took my headphones out, but it's not. So I'm just going to put my headphones back in. Okay, right, can everyone hear me? Yep, okay, great. So I'm Martha. I am a fundraising consultant, and yeah, I've worked in corporate partnerships for the majority of my fundraising career. I would say that employee engagement is probably my main skill, but I've done all kinds of things from strategic partnerships to CSR, sponsorship, brand association. I've worked on partnerships that have a value of £1,000. I've worked on partnerships that have values of £500,000. So I've got a range, and yeah, as Lucy said, corporate partnerships is definitely not over during the pandemic. In fact, it's a really interesting time to think about how we can innovate and yeah, be really creative within the partnerships that we already have, and how we can innovate and be creative to attract new partnerships. So I have 3 takeaways as well. I'm just going to say them before I get started. The first is harnessing the power of honesty and vulnerability. The second is embracing digital. The third is being an opportunist. So I'm going to take you through all 3. So the power of honesty and vulnerability. These are really uncertain times. These are difficult times for everybody. Your partners, your prospects, the whole business world is feeling the same kind of anxiety that we in the third sector are feeling too. They've got the same worries. What's going to happen next? How can we ensure that we survive this? So when I was having these initial conversations with all of my contacts when the pandemic first started, I made sure that when we had our initial meetings, we weren't talking about any fundraising asks. We weren't really talking about our organizations at all. We were talking about how we were doing personally, because you know, people think of corporate partnerships and corporate fundraising as very salesy, very businessy, and sometimes it's easy to forget that your key contacts are humans too. We're all grieving and going through serious times of uncertainty. So it was a chance to be really honest with them, and to build some kind of closer relationships that weren't just based on, you know, mutual business interests, and were actually kind of based on getting to know your corporate partners and your key contacts. And then I've been kind of keeping them up to date and being really honest about, you know, once we'd had that initial personal touch, being really honest about where we were at as an organisation. When I was at Refuge, it was, you know, what's going to happen to our beneficiaries without immediate funding for our services. What might life look like if Refuge ceased to exist? And, you know, you shouldn't be afraid to say that your organization is in a vulnerable position, because your businesses will know that. They'll know because they're also in a precarious position themselves, right? So there's no shame in saying, you know, we're struggling and we need support. There's no shame in kind of making that ask. And also you need to be honest with yourself and your teams, right? Fundraisers have a way of finding a million reasons to not take a break, and also to not let other people know that they've taken on too much work. That was true before the pandemic, and it's definitely true with the pandemic. So be honest about how you're doing, your workload, and whether you need to take a little bit of time off work. So embracing digital. So when we first entered the crisis, you know, lots of people were working from home. I was isolating in my house by myself, and I've been so bored. I have wanted connections so badly. And, you know, I keep going to these random events, digital events that I would not normally go to. And we've got a unique opportunity right now for digital engagement. And I'm gonna, I'm gonna take you through a really good opportunity that came up for me in my last contract. So I worked with a makeup brand. And I really struggled to engage with them. You know, they had employees across the country. They had a rep model, so people weren't working in kind of the usual office model. So if I wanted to give a presentation, there'd be times I'd travel from London to Northampton to give my presentation, and there'd be 6 people that turned up. It was a complete, you know, waste of resources, waste of time. So I had a conversation, I had that frank conversation with that partner, and I spoke to them about, you know, why don't we have good engagement? How can we change that? And they said people don't want to talk about domestic abuse. It's a difficult subject, and they find it uncomfortable. So how can we break down that barrier? And, you know, make people a little bit more open talking about it. So I suggested putting on a digital lunch and learn, where people were able to submit questions to me ahead of time. And, you know, things they always wanted to know, things that they might be, you know, too frightened to ask in public. It was all anonymous. And then we had an open Microsoft Teams call. I mean, you can do it on Zoom or anything like that. And it took an hour to plan, and the call took an hour. I had one person from the domestic abuse helpline who spoke about the helpline for 5 minutes, and then disappeared off the call. And I answered the questions and kind of had like people chatting to me in the chat function. I had 88 people turn up on that call. I had, you know, a fundraising call to action in the call. I had a donate link. I was giving people everything that they needed to kind of get moving with fundraising. And, you know, in the weeks that followed that presentation, that lunch and learn, I had such an uplift in engagement and donations from that business, when before the pandemic, I couldn't even get 7 people into a room to listen to me talk. So it's really important to kind of capitalize on that kind of digital engagement, because that does eventually turn into income. So if there's, you know, if there's digital projects that you've always wanted to get off the ground, now's the chance. Ones that you haven't had funding for, now's the chance. You know, there are lots of businesses that are looking to sponsor digital events. Make the most of live stream platforms. Use Facebook for fundraising, Tiltify, Instagram, Comic Relief are doing some amazing things with this, and so is Mermaid Charities. They did a digital festival and live streamed kind of through Tiltify all day. You can ask your businesses to run that kind of digital festival. It doesn't have to be like, you know, the most glamorous event in the world. It can be a talent show, but, you know, staff members are looking to engage with each other. They're all bored. They haven't seen their colleagues in a non-work context for a really long time. So, you know, use those opportunities to kind of drive that staff engagement, and use the digital tools available. And all of the tools that I'm talking about right now are free. So use them. And then my final point is about being an opportunist. So all the things that I've kind of spoken about today have been, you know, opportunities that I've seen during this pandemic. And there are so many, you know, it will be different for each organization. There's something that's I found amazing about engagement and opportunities right now, is that I'm able to get those meetings with key stakeholders and CEOs and directors that I took months to get before we all started working from home. Suddenly I can pop into their living rooms within, you know, a 24-hour period of asking for a meeting. Make the most of that. speak to your partners and ask them how you can help them, whether it's staff engagement, employee morale, whether their brand isn't relevant at the moment and they need to use your brand in order to keep relevant in, you know, in social media. Find out what that problem is for them and work out how you can be part of the solution. Because when we start easing out of lockdown, it's going to be a really difficult time, and businesses are going to need something to give them a competitive advantage. They're going to need something that keeps their staff spirits high, and having a partnership with an amazing organisation is a really, really key way that a business can do that. Yeah, there's plenty of opportunities as well to amplify your reach through, you know, if one of your corporate partners or a prospect has got a huge digital reach, ask them to share your fundraising page, ask them to spotlight an amazing thing that you're doing. And don't forget that there are plenty of furloughed staff at your businesses as well who haven't got that much to do at the moment, and will also be looking for opportunities to engage. So don't think that just the people that are currently kind of still working at the moment aren't going to be interested in hearing from you. Now's an opportunity to kind of tap into those furloughed members of staff, and see how they can kind of drive that project of doing fundraising for their business while they're not working. So yeah, those are the things that I've kind of seen in the last couple of months. Power of honesty and vulnerability, and how to harness that to build deeper relationships. Embracing digital, because you're not going to survive if you don't. We're now going into a digital age. It's inescapable. And seizing opportunities, finding out what your businesses need from you, and making sure that you can be part of the solution for them coming out of lockdown. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Martha. So anybody who thinks corporate fundraising is not happening right now, I think Martha just gave you about 100 ideas of how you can get yours going. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Will, who is funding manager at Esmee Fairbairn Foundation, as well as being a freelance management consultant in the not-for-profit and creative sectors. Currently, he is a board member of Attitude is Everything, and has previously worked with a range of different funders, including Help Musicians UK, Youth Music, I'm going to list them all, London Community Foundation, Armed Forces Covenant Fund, and the Health Lottery. So really useful to actually have a funder's perspective today. So in talking about trusts and foundations, Will is going to really share how some of the trusts and foundations have responded to the crisis, but also get you to start thinking about how you need to evolve your approach now, and what you need to be thinking about kind of post-COVID as we move from kind of emergency to recovery. So I'm going to just remind you again about the Q&A. Please put questions in there for after all the speakers have spoken. And then I'm going to hand you over to Will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for the introduction. And I was going to say, actually, today is the first time in 3 months that I've put a proper collared shirt on just for this, as opposed to kind of hanging around in old t-shirts and flip-flops. So it feels good, if nothing else. I'm just going to share my screen, so let me know if this works. See that okay? Great. Also, just to expand on the introduction a little bit, I'm just going to say that although I'm obviously a grants manager at Esmee Fairbairn, that's my main job at the moment. I'm not kind of here representing them or speaking on their behalf. So these are my views on the kind of trusts and foundations sector. So just to start off, I thought I'd give a bit of a kind of general quick overview of the sector, just to set the scene a little bit and give a bit of context. So it's worth around 6.5 billion in giving. So it's a huge amount of money. This is under normal circumstances, obviously. And 2.9 billion of that is given away by the top 300 foundations, but there's over 10,000 trusts and foundations in the UK. And this doesn't even include Arts Council lottery or other public funding. This is kind of private family and corporate trusts and foundations. So those collectively hold about 67 billion in assets. So those investments drive the grant giving. Wellcome Trust is by far the biggest trust in the UK. It does kind of tend to skew the figures a little bit because it's just so rich. But other big ones are Comic Relief, BBC Children in Need, Garfield Weston. And thinking about the arts, the main kind of big arts funders are Esmee Fairbairn Foundation, Paul Hamlin Foundation, Foyle, Claude Duffield and Baring Foundation. But as I said, there's thousands of trusts and foundations, big and small, including lots of local ones. And anyone who's interested in finding out more, the Foundation's Giving Trends report on the ACF website, that's the Association of Charitable Foundations, is a really good resource. It kind of delves into a lot of detail on trusts, how much money they give away. So if anyone's interested, it's free to download. Something else that I didn't put on the slides, which is less positive, is that a study showed in 2018 that the trustee boards of trusts and foundations are 99% white, 2/3 male, and 60% over the age of 65. So there's clearly an issue there in diversity and work to be done to make sure that the funding boards are kind of representative of the people that they serve and fund. So so a little insight into kind of how grant makers and trusts and foundations have kind of initially responded to COVID-19 over the last few months. So obviously there was kind of initial emergency responses. So responding to the immediate needs, so lots of foundations closed for applications and launched kind of emergency funds. So obviously the Arts Council have theirs. Esmee Fairbairn allocated an extra 16 million in emergency funds, and Paul Hamlin an extra 20 million. And that was to kind of see organisations through the initial crisis. They've also taken a kind of collective, flexible approach in repurposing grants, so being flexible and saying, well, we can unrestrict your grant, or we can have less kind of onerous reporting requirements this year to just to help people cut down on the unnecessary admin. 360 Giving, I don't know if anyone knows this resource, it's fantastic. They've launched a COVID-19 grants tracker on their website, and you can see that over 4,000 grants have been made since the pandemic hit, specifically to do with COVID-19. It's a really interesting resource, and you can kind of see almost in real time the grants that are being made around the country that are in relation to it. So just to give a local example, I think there's someone on from Sussex Community Foundation. You can see that they've made 268 grants in the last few months to 259 recipients, totaling over £1 million. And that includes lots of arts related grants that's specifically to do with COVID-19. So fundraisers that are looking at applying for grants now, you can use that resource to see what type of grants are being made, where they're being made and how much. So that might be an interesting resource. There's been quite a lot of funder collaborations and pooled funds. So for example, London Funders is overseeing the London community response. So there's 50 funders part of that. And there's other ones that are actively being set up and worked on now. And just a little note on investments. Obviously, I said earlier that the assets, the kind of investments that the trusts and foundations hold, they drive the grant giving. And obviously with the financial impact of the pandemic, they've taken a hit. So that's obviously going to lead to lower grant making in the future. So that's a challenge, but obviously just much like pensions, you know, investments are long-term things, so they will recover. And 2019 happened to be quite a good year for a lot of trusts and foundations anyway. So that has kind of softened that blow slightly. Just to look at some of the other changes trusts and foundations have made, 350 funders have signed up to a COVID-19 funders pledge. And you can find out more on that website there. That's the kind of adopting certain approaches going forward over the rest of 2020. As I mentioned, lots have closed. So Arts Council have closed, and they focused on their emergency funds for NPOs and non-NPOs. Esmee Fairbairn's closed until September, maybe having to rethink its strategy, which was going to be launched in May. Paul Hamlin has closed as well to the autumn, and the Walton Foundation. But lots of big ones are still open. National Lottery's still open and has a £200 million emergency fund, and that's specifically for small and medium-sized charities and social enterprises. It's also open for its regular funding. Garfield Weston is open for crisis funding and beyond. Foyle Foundation has just reopened for small grants. John Ellerman is open. The Ford Trust has a special raft programme for small charities and social enterprises. That's £5,000 unrestricted grants. That's open now. Henry Smith, and I know for kind of individual freelancers, for if there's any musicians that are unable to work and aren't eligible for government schemes, then Help Musicians UK is doing a hardship fund as well with unrestricted funding there. And then finally, just some kind of expectations and thinking about what I think foundations will be looking for in applications in the near to medium future. So as other presenters have said, kind of remain agile and adaptable to changing criteria, because lots of funds, as they reopen, they will have kind of perhaps narrow or different criteria to account for COVID-19. I think applications that will shine through will be kind of from organisations that don't treat this as a one-off emergency, but kind of think about the longer term and how things will be different now. So that's kind of showing that you can be strategic and not just reactive. To give a couple of examples that I've seen recently, there was a media charity in the West Midlands working with young people. Now they've stopped all their filming and productions at the moment, obviously, but they've already made plans to permanently adjust how they do it so that when they restart, there'll be social distancing in place on all their film shoots. They've bought extra equipment for that. They've put in different plans for that, and that will be a permanent thing. So use this time to think about that kind of thing. Trusts and foundations will be looking for innovation and creative responses to COVID-19, certainly. So a couple of examples again that we've seen at Esmee Fairbairn, an arts organisation in Gloucestershire has applied for a grant towards a creative and co-produced response to the psychological impacts of COVID-19, looking to scale existing arts on prescription services by adding home delivery and a digital offer. So they were really quick off the mark to apply for that. And a theatre in Manchester applied for a grant towards a collaborative scheme in response to COVID-19 will support freelance artists in the Northwest through online development opportunities. So we're already seeing those applications come through now. And I suppose, you know, the pandemic's going to lead to a lot of long-lasting issues, increased mental health problems, unemployment. So it's about using arts or whatever it is you do to respond to those emerging issues. And certainly foundations will be supportive of those. And obviously digital and online, as we've said, is playing a bigger part in projects as well. So we'll be expecting a lot more applications for digital projects. Okay, just gonna stop there. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Will. That was really useful, fantastic. You know, as I said, I'm going to say it again, those slides will be available afterwards and will be sent out to everybody. I just wanted to mention one more resource on Trusts and Foundations side of things, and that's the Charity Excellence Framework. It has a database of COVID-19 funders. Obviously not all relevant, some won't be your geographical area, but they, I mean, there are new funders being added all the time. I think they're up to 600-700. I will stick the link to that one in the chat box, but that was a Charity Excellence Framework. So on to our final speaker, David. He is an incredibly experienced fundraiser across a whole range of different areas of fundraising, but mainly he works in the arts and cultural sector and runs his own consultancy called Apollo Fundraising. He has supported organisations such as the Royal Exchange Theatre, Glyndebourne and English Touring Opera. Today, David's actually going to focus on individual giving. I don't know about you, but I am certainly giving a lot more to charity and crowdfunders right now. And David's going to explore individual giving in the arts and what you need to be focusing on right now. Thank you, David.
Cheers, Lucy. Thank you very much. Let's just bring up some slides. Yeah, as Lucy mentioned, obviously working a lot with arts and culture organisations. So for people in Brighton, I used to live in Lewis. I worked at Glyndebourne as Trusts and Foundations Manager there. More recently, I was the interim head of fundraising at the Royal Pavilion and Museums, and have done work with Brighton and Hove Libraries and Creative Future as well. And for fundraising in Merton, I actually live just down the road. I'm based in Carshalton, so very close to you guys. So I hope wherever you are keeping well and everyone's safe. I wanted to use the 10 minutes I've got to try and answer this question, to try and delve into this. So can we ask individuals to give to the arts and culture sector during a global health pandemic? So I want to use the time to try and unpick. Yep, fix that one. Great, done. Absolutely we can, and in most cases I think we should. But given we've still got 9 minutes left, let's try and sort of unpick this a little bit more. These are some of the questions, some of the queries I've heard from organisations over the last, certainly over the last 10 weeks while we've been in lockdown, as to why they feel they can't ask individuals. So people saying, well, perhaps it appears insensitive. Obviously a lot of people have died very sadly, lots of people have lost loved ones. Is asking for support for the arts and culture sector, is that insensitive? Another common one, people have been financially affected. You know, people have been furloughed or have been made redundant. People are unsure what financial impact this is going to have. Top one, there are more needy causes at the moment. You know, people who are actually on the front line fighting against coronavirus or supporting communities. This one I heard yesterday, it looks like we're jumping on the coronavirus bandwagon. Everyone else is fundraising at this time. It looks like we're just trying to capitalize on this. We're trying to use it to make money. And people feeling that actually it makes our organizations look a little bit dirty. It makes us look desperate and needy to be seen to be asking for money. Going to unpick some of these in a second, but let's look at this on the flip side. So I've been interviewing a number of arts fundraisers during this time just to see how they've been coping, and I want to share two stories with you. The first is the Young Classical Artists Trust, quite a small charity, but they try and support really exceptionally talented musicians at the start of their career. And they realised within 24 hours of the world going into lockdown, obviously all of their young artists, all the people they work with and support, just watched all of their upcoming work wiped out overnight, which obviously means a huge drop in income. And so they got talking and saying, well, what do we need to do? We need to try and replace some of that income. We need to support them as much as we can. So as well as saying, right, we're going to put as much of our reserves as we can, they said we're going to set up a hardship fund. And we heard Will mention the hardship fund that Help Musicians have set up just now. Whitecat sent themselves the target of £5,000. They hit that within 2 days, and at the end of the 3 weeks, they have raised over £100,000. Put that in perspective, that was their previous fundraising income for all of the last financial year. So we're talking quite a substantial sum of money compared to the size of that organisation. Similar story from the Park Theatre up in London. If you haven't come across Park, they're a relatively new theatre, 7 years old. But again, had to go into lockdown, had to shut everything down. And they realised that furloughing staff wasn't going to be enough, that they really needed that cash injection. So they picked up the telephone. Their artistic director led this, went out to people that they already had a relationship with, people they already knew. £300,000 in the space of 1 week. And again, Park Theatre, that is their total annual fundraising income. Those are just two stories of a huge number we've seen from across the sector. People that are actively fundraising, people who are asking for donations, are seeing support, are receiving support at this time. And I think it leads us to question some of these arguments people have been making for not asking, because if these things were true, those organisations wouldn't be seeing those results. If it was insensitive, if people were looking at this as jumping on the bandwagon, people won't donate. You don't see organisations raising their entire fundraising income in the space of a week. I'm going to pick up the third point there, if there are more needy causes at the moment. And I think this comes down to the heart of it. And I'm sorry to say, I mean, if that's your view at this time, where was that when we've seen rising homelessness figures over the last few years? Where's that when we look at race inequality at the moment, and obviously in the news at the moment after the killing of George Floyd? If our view is that there are other more needed causes, we're never going to be in a position where we can fundraise for the arts and culture sector. And that I think simplifies too much the position our supporters are in. You know, our supporters are capable of caring about different causes, different needs at the same time. We can feel passionate, we can respond to those things. And I would argue it's not for us to make that decision on behalf of our supporters. So if our organisations need help, our job is to try and find the people who are most likely to care, give them the information that they need to be able to say, absolutely, I want to help. And let's look at this in terms of then why people are giving. And so when I do full training sessions on fundraising, I always say fundraising is not about your organisation. If we boil it down, what we're really trying to do is find the people who need or want to change something about their world, how they perceive the world. And our job as fundraisers is to try and empower them to make that change. So what needs have our supporters got at the moment? Well, I mean, Martha raised some of them just now. So I want you to, I know I can't see you, but sort of raise your hand or do something, stretch out, because we've all been sat down for a little while. If any of these apply to you. So we heard Martha say just now that isolating in lockdown on her own, is feeling bored. Anyone else shared that? Anyone else felt lonely? Anyone else felt powerless, or this sense of just not being able to control things at the moment? Everything's happening around us and we can't control it. Hands up who's feeling sort of disconnected from the communities that they normally engage with. So not just friends and family, but feeling that sense of, I'm not able to spend time with people who share the same interests as me. And hands up who's starting to now think about, actually, what do I want the world to look like as we come out of lockdown? What if we're defining this new normal, what do I want that to look like? I think I can see a couple of people, obviously the panelists raising hands. We are all feeling this, and our supporters are all feeling these things as well. We're in a really great position in that we can really empathise with the needs our supporters have at this time, because we're all feeling it. And the great news from our point of view is fundraisers can provide the cure to all of these issues. We can help through our work people to address these needs they've got. We can help people feel less bored. We can help people feel connected to communities they care about. We can give them a chance to seize back a little bit of power, to take control over something and make a positive change at this time by doing our jobs, whether that's directly asking for money or just engaging with supporters and connecting them to the work our charities and our arts organisations are still doing at this time. So I'm going to really quickly run through 3 things I think you can be doing to engage with your supporters and your individual networks at this time to try and meet some of those needs. First one, reach out, find out how they are. A lot of people, the only people they have spoken to are the people in their houses. They're getting sick and tired of doing Zoom games nights with the rest of their family. They want to hear from someone else, and the telephone at the moment is a really powerful tool for this as well. People who are using the phone, and it's not something we tend to do that much in arts fundraising, but we're finding it much easier to get in contact with people, and people are happy to talk for longer. So just find out how they are, and this then gives us that chance before making an ask to see, is it insensitive? What position are they really in? But it also signals to our supporters that we're not just in it for the money, we care about them. I want to quickly show this this great email I got from RNLI a few weeks ago, and this has been doing the rounds a lot on Twitter, completely out of the blue. You're part of our crew, we look out for each other, we just want to check how you are. And this blew my mind when I received it. I said, that's really impressive. That's them taking the time out to say, we just want to check you're okay, because you've always been there for us. We want to check that, is there anything we can do? I've shared the link to the full version of that on Twitter, and I'll share it again. So do check that out. But as I say, use it, check how they are. Is there anything you can do? This might involve trying to connect them to other supporters. A number of arts organisations have been experimenting with doing Zoom networking events. So again, bringing like-minded people into the same space to have conversations, to get them to interact, helping to address that loneliness, that boredom, helping them to feel connected to communities. Most of them will want to know what's going on with you, and particularly as we start moving towards arts and culture organisations thinking about reopening, people are going to have questions. So again, this is a good chance to start engaging with them. And this is a chance for you to see what matters to them. You know, ask them what they want to see in the new normal. Get that information as to what do they care most about, because then when it comes to finding the right fundraising ask, the right propositions for people, we've got that information about them. Ask for help if you need it. Both of the examples I shared just now, people we can see there's absolutely a need, and without money we're not going to be able to address it. You might have seen Chester Zoo over the last 24 hours have launched their crisis campaign, because they've seen all of their earned income, their commercial income dry up, and then they're now really in need of support. And again, the Park Life campaign was based on that same thing. So it might be that you're facing a crisis at the moment. The Park Life campaign has been really interesting, particularly the public-facing side that they've just launched. So they looked at it and said, well, we don't know when we're going to be able to reopen, but we do know when we get that green light, it's going to cost us about £100,000 in 3 months to be able to get stuff back on stage. So whenever we get that call from the government that we can reopen the doors, we need that 100k war chest effectively there to be able to get to the point where we can actually reopen. So they started fundraising for that straight away, and they were really clear with that message. We don't know when we're going to be spending it, but we do know if we don't have this money, we're not going to be able to reopen. So if you're looking at this at the moment, thinking there's still a lot of uncertainty around, think, are there ways that we can get around that? Do we know that there are certain costs that whenever this happens, we'll need to pay, and therefore have we got an ask that we can go to people to help get us back to the point where we can open the doors and welcome people in? So be really clear about the problem you're facing, and be explicit about what's at risk and why should they care? Why should your target audience care about this? Be really clear what you're asking people to do, and then make it easy for them to help. Again, people being really nervous about going out at the moment, going to the post office, things like that. This is a great time. If you've not got digital channels, digital platforms for accepting donations set up, this is a good time to start looking at that. And focus on the people closest to you. People are supporting the causes they care most about. So we're not seeing acquisition of new donors performing particularly well at the moment. People are sticking to the causes they've already supported and trying to make sure they're okay first and foremost. And I would say an important part of the message is to say, make it clear that it's okay to say no. And again, this taps into this idea that some of the people you're writing to will have been financially impacted by what's going on, but not everyone will have been. Give people that chance. We completely understand if you're not able to support our work at this time. And finally, and again, this links back to what Martha was saying about vulnerability and honesty. That's not just on a person-to-person basis. Our organisations need to get much more comfortable with being vulnerable to our supporters. And I'm going to go further. I said we've got to get rid of this cold corporate crap. Most arts fundraising messaging is really boring. One of the great things that's come out of fundraising through this is people have started to be much more open about the problems they're facing, sharing those with people closest to them, and people are responding to it. You can see it a little bit in this Chester Zoo example. I mean, you can sort of feel that anger starting to come out. That's about the fact that the government have let some organisation or some things happen, and the feeling that they're being penalised. So you can start getting that sense that there's a human being and a number of human beings behind this who are not particularly happy. Another example from Dulwich Picture Gallery, the artistic director talking really openly about her experience of lockdown and telling this story that we wouldn't have seen 2 months ago before this. So get out of this mindset. People give to people, so we need to make it easier for people to build that human connection. Be honest about the challenges we're facing, and again, that's why the Park Life campaign works so well. The artistic director could pick up the phone and say, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm really scared because I'm not sure we can get through this without your help. And at that point, I'm going to leave it there because I can see that there are some questions coming in. I'm sure people want to get onto the Q&A.
So thank you so much, David. Again, loads to think about for everybody. I think it's always good to see some real examples. And I think, like David, I quite agree that the arts sector could use the artists a bit more in our creative approaches to fundraising. We're surrounded by artists and creatives. How are we using them to help respond to this this crisis right now, whether it's the crisis out there or the organisational crisis. I think it's really interesting that most of the speakers, and actually one of the questions that's come in, have talked about the need for human contact. Chris has asked to Joe, actually, how are you finding that kind of lack of real human contact in what you're doing? And I guess that's kind of a question for everybody.
I've got a quick answer on that one. We haven't, for the digital festival itself, it's going to take place in July when our usual physical festival would take place. So we haven't started doing all our own live events, but in my other work, I'm working with other organisations and businesses that are doing online events. And so I guess I've kind of got two things to think about. And first of all is, I think like Martha was saying, and about getting digital, is the fact that there are really great softwares and different apps and things that we can use. And especially in Zoom, if you're doing smaller events, just using the breakout rooms part of Zoom, so that you can then break your larger audience into smaller groups. As long as you've got people who can facilitate those rooms and talk to the groups, it means that there's much more sort of one-on-one conversation with the hosts of the event, and also then in between the different participants at the event. So it gives it more of a real contact experience. And for example, when we're doing bigger conferences and seminars where you're just tuning in and watching. And then second to that, it's about, and that's what I was saying about the festival, us wanting to do quality over quantity of content with the physical festival, because we do a really big open program. We have 80 events, it's very busy. We can't afford to do that. And we also haven't done something like this before. So we want to do something smaller and focus on quality of the content that we're giving. So we are doing more research and talking to other event producers and looking at other projects and other people and what they've been doing in terms of delivering events and activities online, especially sort of from the creative sector. So looking at artists that are now changing their work to do digital performances and stuff like that. So with our commissioning, we are specifically looking to work with artists and practitioners who want to develop something new within the way that they create art and perform it and share it, so that our content is trying to be exploring the digital world and is exploring the opportunities we have to present in a different way. That's what I've got to say on that one.
Any of the other speakers want to say anything on that kind of human contact area of things? I mean, I think David really summed it up when we all, I mean, you know, some physically had our hands up, some virtually had our hands up. We are all craving that human contact. Do any of the other speakers want to say anything on that? I think Will just put a hand up.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, one of the best things about being a grant maker is we get invited to lots of things, to see lots of things that we fund, especially arts and culture, and that, you know, it helps to, in assessing work, to actually go and see it, but also to, just to see the difference it makes. And that's something I'm missing. Like last summer, I was invited to loads of things. I was at Birmingham Rep Theatre, I went to Womad Festival, went to a farm in Norfolk, to see work that we funded. And now I don't even leave my living room. So it's quite difficult in that sense.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think some of the things that we forget about are all of the people who aren't in our teams that we would normally speak to, and actually how not having those casual conversations at lunchtime can really slow down getting things done, because normally you'd have a little bit of information and you'd be able to kind of, get things moving with the intel that you've got from like your coffee breaks. And that's something that I've really struggled with. And actually I think, it's really important to think about the amount of time that you'll now need to reinvest, I guess, into having quality conversations online, because it doesn't come as naturally. You don't have those kinds of, moments of, picking up people's body language and kind of like feeling the tone of the room. You actually have to put a lot more effort and come prepared with lists of questions that are actually personal. I find that really helps. And something that I think is really important as we move into doing more Zoom calls is to take off your self view. If you can't see yourself, you actually engage a lot more with the person that you're speaking to, because everybody looks at themselves, like, let's be honest, you just can't help it. But there are functions to turn that off, and actually the quality of your conversations will really improve. I think it's mainly on Zoom that it works, but yeah, I'd have a look on the other apps too.
Thank you. I did not know that was a possibility. I'm definitely checking that out, because you're right, you can't help but look at your own. I realised how much I wildly gesticulate all the time. I had no idea how much I move my arms around. I'd be really aware to keep them down here. David, anything on the kind of human contact side of things?
Well, there was a nice example from English Touring Opera, who you mentioned engaging artists in fundraising. So some of their artists have been providing singing lessons via Zoom and kind of putting up these short videos, but they've also started getting them to pick up the phone or have Zoom conversations with their supporters, and it's sort of broken down some of that pressure of the artists up until now being a bit sort of reluctant to get involved with fundraising. But this was a chance that actually you just talk to people talking about the same thing, want to have a quick chat, and I think both the artists and the supporters have really enjoyed that chance just to have a really informal sort of no agenda conversation about something that both sides are passionate about.
So there's a question here from, it says David and Jill, I don't know if it's David or Jill, just asking about panelists' thoughts on communicating with people who have limited access to digital. There's obviously a lot of people still out there who don't have access to a computer or phone, whatever it is, in the way that we might. Any kind of top tips for people about thinking about those audiences? Anyone?
I mean, Post is still performing well. There've been some nice examples of fundraisers either working from home or even some of the ones that have been on furlough, just writing really short postcards or little cards to send off to supporters, just as a way of just thinking of you. And again, that's a really nice thing to receive through the door, something that just says, just hope you're okay. So yeah, while a lot of people do seem to be preferring digital at the moment, it doesn't mean those other channels aren't still available. So it's part of it is knowing your audience and knowing which ones are best suited to them.
Yeah, I would say I've seen a few grant applications recently, particularly working with the kind of veterans and the armed forces and stuff, where people are disengaged digitally, but organisations are applying for funds to lend them iPads or smartphones, give them a bit of training over the phone, how to use them, and then they're with them for a few months so that they can do Skype calls and engage with friends. So that's something I've seen definitely an increase in.
Martha and Joe, did you have any thoughts on that? There are other questions coming in. No, you're right. Okay, so Jeremy Taylor's asking, away from fundraising, do you feel companies are looking at their cultural reintegration of staff to return to the workplace? Could the arts and cultural charities assist with some of that work?
Shall I answer that? Yeah, I definitely think you're onto something there. A lot of the conversations I've had with businesses who are kind of coming out of lockdown is, our staff are going to be quite unhappy. We don't know what's coming. People are worried about their job security, and actually, how can your partnership be the key to, building employee morale and retaining their staff as we kind of go into quite an uncertain time, because we don't really know what's going to happen. There's a recession coming. So, is there something that your partnership, your organisation can offer that business? Whether it's kind of, doing an event for them in the first couple of weeks, whether it's opportunities to engage with, the arts that they might not necessarily have had before. There are some very simple things that you can do that might seem quite basic, but actually to a business and to their cultural well-being, it makes all the difference. So thinking about how you can support staff morale is something that I would definitely recommend doing right now, and thinking about what you can offer businesses, and having a clear list is something that's really important.
Thank you. Is there anybody? And I think the other side of that, Mother, I guess, is don't be afraid to just ask them. If you've got an idea about a way to engage or to support a company that you know locally, or through somebody, whatever, don't be afraid to just approach them and say, I've got this idea. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
worst? They say no, or they park it for later. You know, as you know, I think all of the speakers have alluded to, and particularly Martha, you know, there's a lot of people at home feeling the way we're feeling, and just having a new person kind of get in contact with you with a, you know, exciting idea. All they can do is say no. It's worth asking. And also it's worth having a think about where you are, which sectors are actually not struggling right now. You know, there are some businesses that are doing not very well out of the crisis, but the crisis works really well with their business model. Are there any of those businesses locally? Could you be talking to them about that? Got a few more questions coming up. Chris has got 2 questions. I'm just going to read them straight out, if that's all right with everyone. From a personal perspective, I work as an exhibition designer, and in March, sorry, it's slightly glitched, sorry, and my income stopped in March and unlikely to start again until March 2021. Are there any funds available to creative-based businesses who fall in the furlough gap between being a limited and only get a minimum furlough payment? That's me too, by the way. I know I'm in that situation. I think a lot of us run small businesses because that's how we were told to do by our tax people. Does anyone have any top tips? I know that if you are, I don't know if you're Brighton Hove based, but the discretionary fund is just open. The deadline for that is the 12th, I believe, which is a week today. It's the same form whether you're applying for 2.5, 10 or 25,000. That information about the discretionary fund is available on the Brighton Hove City website. Perhaps we'll put the link in there. Sorry, I saw Jo had her hand up there.
I was actually going to point to the same fund because I've been, many people that I know are in that exact same situation in regards to the being in the gap where the funding isn't quite there. I think if you're not based in Brighton Hove, do contact your council, really go through the website, because I know, for example, working with Westminster Council, they're putting out similar funds, and they're also doing surveys to work out where the gap is in the area for companies and try and support them. So, yeah.
The other thing I would suggest is having a look at whatever your local economic partnership area is. I've just been doing some work with Music Venue Trust, who are a national charity, and looking at what the opportunities for grassroots music venues, about 1/3 of which are CICs, and 2/3 are limited companies. They have had some support through some of the schemes, but each local economic partnership is releasing funds in different ways. The Brighton Hove one, with Coast Capital, has already released a set of funds, but the arts and creative sector very much felt it wasn't with them in mind, and have been campaigning to get that looked at. And they are talking about opening up another fund. You can pop an expression of interest in there. That's Coast Capital, so that you're kind of on their list when their funding reopens again. So check out your local economic partnership. Anything else on that one before I ask Chris's other question?
The only thing I'd add, for musicians and for people working in the theatre sector, the unions have set up various hardship funds. I haven't seen anything for museums, but make sure you're signed up to the Association of Independent Museums newsletter, and also the Museums Association newsletter. I'm sure you are already, but any funds like that that are particularly aimed or geared towards people in that sector are likely to be advertised through there.
Yeah, thank you. So his second question is, I'm currently working on a digital idea to support virtual trade shows, but as yet have been unable to secure funding. Do you guys have any suggestions for funds that I could apply for to kick that off? I'm not sure I've got any to add other than what I've said. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? No, okay, I've got some questions for the panel. So people can keep adding questions to the Q&A. I haven't actually been looking at the chat to see if any questions pop up there, but I will do in a second. So I wanted to ask the panel, I'm talking to a lot of people who've just lost their confidence. I think that's a lot to do with where people's mental health is right now. It's taken a knock for different reasons. Certainly as a trust fundraiser, we are getting a lot of no's right now. How would you go about kind of getting your fundraising mojo back? Who wants to go first? How do you get your mojo back?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think I can relate to that. I'd say that, you know, I keep trying to remember why I got into fundraising in the first place, and remembering kind of the organisations that I'm representing, and what I guess the fact that I need to give my all at this point in time to really help them. I have to rise to the challenge, keeping my mental health intact. But ultimately, I think there is a kind of, it puts a fire in your belly to, you know, see a challenge and remember that part of fundraising is rising to the occasion, and stepping up. So I think, you know, thinking about what about fundraising puts fire in your belly is really, really important, and then going for that first. And then everything else will kind of fall back into place, and you'll remember that you're amazing at this, and that you love the job, and there are reasons why you did it. It was like, you know, started being a fundraiser in the first place.
Thank you. Go for it, Jo.
Sorry, I keep forgetting my mute's on. Following on from that, definitely, and I think if you're coming at it from an organisational point of view, working for a charity, and you are feeling the hard knocks right now. I know I have with my charity. Really just looking out there and looking at what other people are doing, looking at what similar organisations are doing, what other projects are happening, and doing your research and just using that to then inspire you to think about how you can change what you do. And think, you know, everything that I've been doing with Southwest Fest and the other organisations that I work with is very much like, we don't know exactly what we can do now, but oh, they're doing that and they're doing that. That's amazing. And then it sparks your ideas. So yeah, following on from that, yeah, that would be my advice.
David and Will, how do you get your mojo back? Or maybe you never lost your mojo.
Well, I'm not a fundraiser, but I suppose from a fund giver's perspective, yeah, I mean, I think there's a real sense among trusts and foundations, especially the more well-resourced ones, that they need to step up and they need to allocate more funds. They need to help people. Some of them are still working out exactly how to do that, past the kind of initial emergency responses. But, you know, we're not going to shy away from that. And I think there's loads of work going on to increase funding and spending. So just kind of keep your eyes out for that, I suppose.
I'm not sure I ever had any mojo to begin with, but some of the things, certainly some of the things I found quite useful. Fundraisers are really supportive people, and you've got a really supportive community. So I would definitely be trying to connect with other people in the same boat. So I know there's a group of arts fundraisers across Brighton who certainly used to meet regularly. The IOF has a cultural sector network which brings together arts and culture fundraisers from across the UK, or just get in touch with people you know personally who you really like and say, look, can we just put in a little bit of time just for a more informal catch up? And certainly I've been doing that with other fundraising consultants. Apologies for the noise in the background. So that's one way. Talking to your existing supporters, I think, can be a nice way as well, because it, again, as Martha was saying, it sort of links you back to why you do this, and you're talking to passionate people. So you take out that pressure of asking the money and there being a sort of win-lose mentality around it. It just becomes two people connecting and reminding each other why you both care about this thing. And another thing that I've not tried, but I've seen other people do and really like, is to take time each day just to record one positive thing from each day, so that you can then keep looking back through it. And it just forces you to say, actually, it isn't all doom and gloom. There have been positives, and it helps to pick you up that way as well.
Thank you. Yes, one positive thing. I've written that one down. I'm going to do that. Just on the discretionary fund, a couple of people have asked some questions about that. As far as I understand, it is not open to self-employed, but there is going to be a webinar on it. I just flicked past that by accident. 11 o'clock next Thursday, I think is what I read. And I am guessing, I'm just checking with Rich here, that that information will go out to everybody who signed up to this. Obviously the deadline is on the Friday, so maybe get your application kind of nearly ready to go and then join for that webinar. Yes, Thursday at 11. I've just seen that again. Thank you. And there are some other links going into the chat so people can have a look at those. Kind of slightly related to that, I guess, you know, David was talking about some of the places to stay connected. I'm going to mention the Sussex Fundraisers group on Facebook as well. Please do join that. There might be London-based ones as well, I'm not sure. But the Sussex Fundraisers group is just kind of a place to share, you know, knowledge and information. You know, obviously with things changing so quickly, keeping up to date is really challenging. Can you recommend kind of blogs, low-cost training? Obviously, people have connected here with what we're doing with Always Possible, and they'll keep connected to that. It would be great to hear about some places that people are accessing information. I'm going to mention one, which is focused for fundraisers, which is Fundraising Everywhere. That everything on there is free if you are a small charity. You can contact them and sign up. Each of their webinars, you know, they had a whole week festival in May, they've had a COVID one day, they've got a 3-day individual giving conference next week and another COVID one day, then they've got a grants and trust and foundation one coming up, and then there's an arts one in August. If you pay £20 a month, that's what I do, I'm a member, I get access to everything, and I get access to everything that happened before. So even something that was back in November, you know, lots of the fundamentals don't change, so you can still access some of that stuff. So that's been, for me personally, a bit of a lifeline, because there's so much I can't curate it all. So with Fundraising Everywhere, it kind of feels like they've curated it for me and I just keep an eye on that. Anybody else got any kind of top tips for where people should be looking for information to keep up to date?
I know that we're sort of talking a lot about the Brighton side of things. I know there's people on here from the London Merton area. So again, just looking at your local council websites, like most of the councils are actually really compiling good resource lists, materials list responses, supporting both business sector, charitable sector as well. So if you haven't already done so, do sort of dig deep and contact them and talk to them as well. I have great relationships with different members of different councils with projects where I work, so they always want to help, and if they can't help, they know of organisations like Always Possible that have got those kind of groups of resources available to people.
Thank you. Anyone? There's a couple in the chat. Henrietta has mentioned NCO. They've actually opened up loads of their stuff that previously you could only get as a member, is now on there for free. So now's a really good time to go and have a look at NCVO. Kata is highlighting arts, fundraising and philanthropy. They've got loads of really fantastic blogs going out at the moment. That's definitely one to have a check on. Do the panelists have any other ones that they wanted to mention? Oh, okay, I will ask one of my other.
There's UK Fundraising, which is sort of the one I rely on most for news and information on things that are going on across the fundraising sector, and that normally includes links to events or discussions. So that's sort of a good way of keeping on top of things.
And I would also recommend Black Fundraisers UK as a network. If there are any Black fundraisers on the call, it can be quite lonely. Because of the lack of diversity in the sector, but it's a great way to connect with other fundraisers who share your experience.
I think people are putting links in. Will somebody pop a link in to Black Fundraisers, please? That'd be great. Foundation for Social Improvement, Henrietta says as well. Artsfundraising.co.uk. Oh, David just popped that in. So, sorry, I've just lost the time because I made you all massive on my screen. We've got 7 minutes left. I've got a couple more questions I wanted to ask the panel. I wanted to ask you about, a lot of us are really overwhelmed, you know, there's so much going on. I certainly feel like I'm on a roller coaster. When there's so much to do, what's the kind of first thing you think we need to be focusing on in our organisations? Anyone want to take that one, or is that too big a question? Go for it, Joe.
Yeah, I think definitely from my learning from the festival, and also again from other organisations that I talk to and work with, it is just recognising that we are actually still going through the pandemic. It's not like the pandemic's ended and everything's okay again. And we're not just working from home. We're working from home whilst managing life in a pandemic. So to start simple and to start small, and not to try and set massive goals that you ought to have everything fixed by now, or you need to make everything just as good as it was the way before. I think try and set small, simple goals that are manageable and achievable, and then work your way up, and not berate yourself for not managing to do better than that at this time, is my advice, really.
Thanks, Jo. I saw a really powerful thing that I think came out of the one of the councils or governments in Canada, and it was saying that, you know, you really need to remember that it's not that we're working from home. That's what we used to do before the pandemic. We're now working at home, and we're working at home with a partner and perhaps children, or we're isolating with an elderly parent. We're working at home and we're homeschooling and we're doing everything. It's not working from home as it was before, for those of us who used to spend quite a lot of time working from home, and that, you know, some of that's about giving ourselves a little bit of a break. Jeremy Taylor suggested that, you know, good place to start is thinking about the needs of donors, partners, sponsors and supporters, maybe thinking about other people when, you know, it's hard, thinking about yourself all the time. Anything else on that question? Got another couple more.
Yeah, I would say that communication is key at this point. Even if there's even if a business that, well, you know, from a corporate partnership side, even if a business, you know, isn't able to give at the moment, keep them involved in what you're doing. Keep the communication up, because they'll remember you, and they'll remember that you know, wanted to talk to them. And also, yeah, as I said, you know, people want to talk still, so make the most of this time where people are still desperate to talk.
I've definitely heard lots of stories of people saying, oh, it took me a year and I was just about to have a cup of coffee with somebody, or actually I've been trying to get a cup of coffee with that somebody and now I'm talking to them tomorrow. You know, I think that opportunity of everybody being at home is one that sometimes actually is to our advantage. David is saying that I got involved recently in a new online acting community, enabling people to post tapes to New Script Daily. That sounds amazing, which is very helpful for keeping your hand in. Very supportive community, relatively inexpensive, £35 for 21 days. So there's an organisation obviously that's trying to innovate and update what they're doing and meeting the needs of their audience. Any more questions? So as we kind of start to wrap up, I was just wanted to ask the panel kind of what do they think is the kind of key question that organisations and kind of individual freelancers should be asking themselves right now, either as a kind of daily like mantra to ask ourselves, or to kind of get the kind of juices flowing on making a plan with all this amazing information. What would your key question people need to be asking themselves be? Who wants it? David, you're not muted. Do you want to go first?
No, sorry. I think it's just continuing to ask yourself, what is the need our organisation's here to address? And just keeping that in mind, because I think that then helps guide what you can do to start moving out of lockdown, and as we start sort of planning for the future. But I think also that I always find that's quite useful for keeping my own energy up as well. And if you keep that eye on, this is why I'm here, this is why I get up every morning. And that, I think that's true whether you're a charity, whether you're a consultant, whether you're people supporting the charity sector. Just what is it I'm here to do? What need am I here to meet? And use that as a sort of guiding star throughout this.
Thank you. What's your next, Martha?
Sure. I think that, I mean, from a corporate partnerships perspective, I think you should always be asking yourself, what do I have to offer? And you'll be surprised, even if you think you haven't got anything to offer, you really do, if you kind of sit and map out what you can give. And I think not-profits have a real tendency to undersell what they have, and to think that, you know, a lot of the opportunities that they can offer are meaningless, and that's just not true. So what can I offer? How can I package that, and how can I use that to my advantage in the business market?
Thank you. I'm going to say Joe, because you're next on my screen. What are you asking yourself every day?
What am I asking myself? I mean, I think what is the need and the current need? The big thing for us was looking at how things have changed with our community and what was the need, and how then can we fix it in our current capacity. So I guess is, what can you do in the capacity and the resources you currently have, and trying to figure that out to support what is the need and what you can offer, the in-between bit.
Amazing. Thank you. And Will?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, I'm also on the board of Attitudes Everything, which is a live music access charity helping deaf and disabled music fans access venues and festivals. And obviously, we rely heavily on the live music industry being thriving and profitable, and not only for income, but in order to engage with them and support them. And obviously, that's just disappeared overnight, and it's going to be a long, probably quite painful recovery. So we're asking ourselves questions at the moment, and a lot of them are tough, and how can we adapt? How can we adapt quickly? But I think it's important also not to lose sight of your mission and your overall ethos, and don't kind of drift, mission drift too much away from that just because we're in an emergency. So it's a kind of bit of a balancing act.
Thank you, Will. So we're pretty much out of time, so I'm just going to wrap up and say that all of the presentations will be sent out to everybody, so you'll be able to see them. Obviously, this has been live recorded, put on Facebook. So if you missed something somebody said, you'll be able to go back and have a look at that on Facebook. Perhaps if Richard or Vicky could put the link to the Facebook live feed in, so people can kind of tag that. Obviously, I'm sure stuff will be shared by Always Possible coming up. It would be really useful for people to let us know. I don't know, maybe some of you have sent chat messages to Vicky about what else you want to know. Is there something that we've covered today that you want to kind of deep dive into, get more detail on? Is there another topic that we haven't covered that is really what your business needs to be thinking about right now in terms of kind of growth and moving on to kind of, as we shift from emergency to kind of recovery? What are you thinking about? What do you need to know? We're going to have a final poll. Vicky, do you want to pop that up now? And I think what's really left for me to say is thank you so much. Like so much at the moment, this was brought together kind of in the last week. I really want to thank the panelists for making their time. Thank you for everybody who has come along and asked questions, and please do keep asking us questions. We shared social media links for various people. We've shared the social media for Always Possible. I'm on LinkedIn, come and find me. I'm sure that's probably the same for the rest of the speakers. We all talked about how important it is to be making connections and talking to people right now. So certainly the door's open for me, for people to chat. And I'm guessing that's the same for all the other panelists. Should have asked you first, really should know. But yes, contact anybody and ask questions. And thank you so much. I think there'll be so much more to discuss, but I'm really sorry that we're out of time. Thank you everybody for coming. And I have no idea how we end the, how do I stop? I'll hand over to Vicky to do the honours. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Do we all just turn it off? I'm not even sure, sorry.
Hello, I can only end the whole thing, but people are leaving.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't want to lose the chat in case people are still typing.
Or they want to ask a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll just make sure everyone's had a chance to type what they need.
Well done, everyone. That was great. Really
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, really good. Oh, I can see there's only, oh, you can see them leaving the room. I hadn't noticed that bit before. It'd be really good to have a quick chat. If that is it, is it still live?